Your Excellency, President Masisi of Botswana, First Lady of Botswana, Madam Masisi, Ambassador Mokgweetsi of Botswana, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a warm welcome to Brookings. I'm Brahima Coulibaly, the Vice President of the Global Economy and Development Program. On behalf of the Brookings Institution, I'm delighted to welcome Your Excellency. I believe this is your first visit to Brookings. In the past few weeks, Ambassador Mokgweetsi and the AGI Director, Dr. Odu, and their teams have worked closely to make this possible. So my special gratitude to both teams. Botswana is by far one of the best managed economies in Africa. Even with the current multiple and overlapping shocks that Africa and the broader global economy are facing, the Botswana economy recovered lost ground from the pandemic. The country has one of the highest vaccination rates in Africa. And after falling sharply in 2020, government revenues have bounced back to pre-pandemic levels. A robust stockpile of foreign exchange reserves and low debt levels have helped the country to make the investments necessary for economic recovery without compromising Botswana's financial stability. And Botswana continues to be recognized for its good governance, as illustrated by the high ranking of the Mo Ibrahim Governance Index. Nonetheless, like most countries, Botswana faces some challenges. Inflation reached double digits this year, and unemployment rose to its highest level in 3 decades. And achieving inclusive growth, prosperity for all, remains a priority. This is clearly a great deal. There's clearly a great deal to learn from His Excellency's stewardship of Botswana. Before his election as president, he held many positions of trust and responsibility, including Vice President of Botswana from 2014 to 2018, Minister of Education and Skills Development, and Minister for Presidential Affairs and Public Administration, among others. We are very privileged to have you with us, Your Excellency. And once again, Mr. President, welcome to Brookings. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Odu.
Mr. President, I welcome you on behalf of AGI.
Oh, thank you.
For you to give your awesome remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, Dr. Ogu, First Lady, Ministers, Ambassador, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. I'm humbled by the invitation to speak to you on the Botswana Transformation Agenda, a subject that is very dear to my heart. My deep appreciation also goes to the Brookings Institute, Vice President, Global Economy and Development, Brahima S. Coulibaly. I hope I didn't massacre that name. For the exclusive opportunity to give a public lecture at this prestigious institution. Allow me to commend you for the work that you do. You've assembled great depth of knowledge from more than 300 leading experts in government and academia from all over the world who provide quality and in-depth research, policy recommendation, and analysis on a range of public policy issues. Your institution is playing a pivotal role in contributing new ideas for solving problems facing society at the local, national, and global levels. That you continue to do this on a non-profit basis leads me to conclude that Brookings Institute is one of the greatest gifts to humanity. Applause, applause. That's where you have. The mandate of the Brookings institution has a near convergence with our very own Botswana Institute for Development Policy Analysis, BIDPA for short, and therefore a fitting collaboration between the two in terms of work of carrying out research in fields of economics, in fields of development, governance, and analysis of public policy issues would go a long way towards injecting fresh thinking and guiding innovative policy formulation and solutions. Tim Marshall, an author and journalist, is reputed for his participation on the front lines of conflict, from which he draws inspiration for his popular works. From this vantage point, he was able to illustrate some dramatic events he witnessed around the world. He used these experiences to pursue powerful themes and truisms in his books, Prisoners of Geography, as well as The Power of Geography. He writes to convey thoughts on the forbidding limitations of geographical factors such as mountains, rivers, and deserts, which influenced and contributed to the historical dynamics on how societies developed, their preconceptions, their fears, and their hopes. Well, my own country, Botswana, hemmed in the center of Southern Africa, is not far removed from these geopolitical and historical perspectives. It has much of its landscape defined by the vast Kalahari Desert. The geographical size of Botswana is similar to that of the Lone State, Texas, Lone Star State. Oh, it's almost lone sometimes. Sorry, I hope there are no Texans here. Though at 2.3 million, our population is not comparable. However, the Okavango Delta, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, juxtaposes the arid and sandy Kalahari with a vibrant and transformed wetland home to some of the most endangered mammals, like the white and the black rhinoceros, lions, cheetah, and yes, the African wild dog. In addition to Botswana being attributed to the first origins of humankind, there is therefore no second guessing that iconic wildlife species like the elephants have been on full display in their natural habitat that is Botswana, since the first story of creation evolved. This might just explain why then Botswana is home to the highest number of elephants in the wild in the world. That is our geography, our ecology, and our reality. By fortune and misfortune of this geography, those who held the reins before our independence in 1966 overlooked the potential mineral wealth that lay beneath, hidden in the sands of the Kalahari. For indeed, at independence, we inherited a country in deplorable development state. Thankfully, the soul and fabric of our society, the way of life of our people, the norms and the cultural practices were left pretty much unadulterated. Using the springboard of these standards and values, we set for ourselves national priorities, as in the national principles of democracy, self-reliance, unity, development, and Boto. Boto. Some of you might pronounce it Botho, but it's Boto. The tenets which continue to guide our National Vision 2036, giving expression to our agenda for social and economic transformation. We learned early on that we should, as a country, incline our persuasive spirit beyond the limiting factors of our geography. We determined that our future should not be held hostage by the unpleasant phase of the history of subjugation imposed by hostile regimes who surrounded us at the time and almost overwhelmed us with their refusal to accept the noble principle of multiracialism. We used the multilateral platforms to denounce injustices and readily accepted the libel and label of punching above our weight. We united our strength with the cause and plight of those in the struggle to rid themselves of segregation policies that were inimical to the interests of the representative majority of the entire Southern Africa. Our hopes were not diminished, even against the siege that threatened to influence our misconceptions. We recorded some success along the way due to the pursuit of democratic norms upon which we based our economic transformation, ensuring that the dust at our feet will one day be replaced by a sparkle when our investment infrastructure expands from the pitiful road network of only 3 kilometers inherited from the departing colonial administration in 1966 to include fiber network connectivity from the workplace to the home. We did this for us. We consolidated the gains of our self-rule and held elections every 5 years since independence in 1966 to renew the mandate to govern, a counter-narrative that was not too common in our part of the world at the time. We continue to build that profile as Botswana and shall never stop. All the while we wished for others what we cherish at home, a plural society that respects norms and standards, democratic ideals that strengthen institution building. To that end, we contributed troops to peacekeeping missions in the early 1990s to Somalia and presently deploy a guard against insecurity in the province of Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. Our regional institutions, such as the frontline states established to shore up anti-apartheid resistance and provide support to the liberation struggle of neighboring states, have now transformed into an agenda for more regional integration in the make of the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, headquartered in our capital, Gaborone. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as a country, it is not that we have not had our fair share of challenges along the way. The transitioning from being among the poorest in the world in 1966 and achieving middle income status in 1986, as well as reaching the World Bank classification of upper middle income by 2005, was fraught with obstacles and a steeplechase of impediments. Similarly, developments and uncertainties taking place in one corner of the world manifest in hardship felt by communities in another. An example of these external shocks is the global supply chain disruptions experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict that has threatened food security. As a result, structural deficits and depletion of foreign reserves could not be avoided. Inflation is also above the Bank of Botswana's monetary policy range of 3 to 6%, while levels of unemployment, especially among the youth and graduates, remains a serious concern. However, Botswana's economy continues to display signs of recovery. This is attributed to successful mitigations and the improved performance of the mining sector, particularly the diamond subsector. The momentum of recovery is likely to be sustained in the medium term, with domestic economic growth projected to be 4.2% and 4.1% in 2022 and 2023, respectively. Despite the positive trend and outlook, the rate of growth falls far short of the 5.7% required to attain a high income status by 2036, which is what we aspire for. It is for this reason that we are intensifying our efforts to restructure the economy. This is being done through ramping up industrialization, development of value chains, diversification, and beneficiation of our minerals. So the need for transformation to higher income has never received greater emphasis. According to BIDPA, the first generation during the period after independence was from rural agricultural economy to a fast-growing mineral-led economy. In terms of the aspirations of our National Vision 2036, we identified a need to develop a comprehensive national transformation strategy, NTS, that would serve as a single strategy reference document, subject to periodic reviews. The NTS provides a framework for fully coordinated, articulated, and aligned sectoral and industry strategies in the public and private sectors at national and local levels. The NTS also envisions policy alignment by taking bold decisions that reflect long-term national needs rather than short-term interests. The National Development Plans, NDPs, including the second Transitional Development Plan that will bridge National Development Plan 11 and National Development Plan 12 between April 2023 and March 2025, act as the vehicles for executing the NTS. Achievement of the overarching Vision 2036, to which the NTS is a tributary, is anchored on multi-stakeholder partnerships that mobilize and share knowledge, expertise, technology, and financial resources. The NTS provides a framework for the fundamental changes needed in legislation, programs, policies, practices, institutions, and mindset change to transform Botswana from a resource-based economy to a knowledge-based economy, driven by competitiveness, productivity, and efficiency. You'll be pleased to know that just like we launched the Economic Transformation and Recovery Plan, ERTP, to mitigate the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, other relevant national strategies were also taken on board in developing the NTS, such as the Reset Agenda and Smart Bot Strategy, aimed at driving transformation across the economy. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Here is our value proposition. Botswana remains one of the leading socio-economic models in Africa and the developing world. The country has a strong culture of peace, stable democracy, and relatively good baseline infrastructure. Botswana remains one of the strongest African economies with solid macroeconomic fundamentals. Botswana is a globally respected brand for having successfully utilized natural resources for the social upliftment of citizens, for which we have now been given the honor to host the Kimberley Process Secretariat. We have made significant strides in social performance with improved poverty reduction and healthcare, which further strengthens environmental, social, and governance compliance. Relatively speaking, Botswana remains one of the least corrupt countries globally, an attractive proposition for investors and talent. The attributes mentioned and the factors above position Botswana as one of the best placed countries to attract global talent, FDI, and diversification through targeted investments. With the establishment of an export-led economy that welcomes foreign skills and a transformative mindset, the country can achieve high income status by 2036. I am convinced. There remains a window of opportunity for Botswana to catapult and transform itself to high income status. Sectors with high potential growth include manufacturing, trade and services, commodities, agriculture, tourism, energy infrastructure, and sports and creatives. This is not a window of opportunity for ourselves only as citizens of Botswana, but is also for those who see Botswana as a springboard to other markets, especially capitalizing on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, AFCTA, that presents vast opportunities for improved exports to the rest of Africa. As I conclude, I found this excerpt from the annual report 2022 of the World Bank quite compelling in its description of stories similar to that of Botswana. And to paraphrase, our efforts are strengthened by a wide range of partnerships with other multilateral institutions, UN agencies, non-governmental organizations, civil society, academia, and the private sector. Our partnerships have played a crucial role in combating the pandemic, including greater food insecurity. To all friends of Botswana, including you gathered here, just make sure you don't miss the very next boat that takes you to Botswana as your destination. I'm not being facetious. I know Botswana is a landlocked country. It's just to get you thinking. Thank you.
I sensed a tepid round of applause. I think we need to do better. A big round of applause. Thank you very much. And thanks for those online tuned into this event this morning. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have a couple of rounds of conversations with His Excellency Masisi, and then we'll open it up to some questions from the floor, and we'll also not forget those online who are tuned in. As their questions come in, we will pose to His Excellency. His Excellency mentioned BITPA, the Botswana Institute for Development and Policy Analysis. Your Excellency, the AGI at Brookings, one of the things we do very, very well is our partnerships across the continent. And I'm delighted to let you know that BITPA is now one of our strongest partners on the African continent.
Wow.
And recently, we worked very closely with BITPA to convene Botswana youths to attend the COP27, Africa's COP. So our relationship with BITPA is really, really strong. And just one more point, the finance minister herself, our sister, Madam Serema, was here during the World Bank annual meeting. And her story was just at a time when the nation's capital was full of stories of what's happening in Africa. She sort of disabused us of the danger of a single story by telling us the fantastic stories about how Botswana coped with the ravaging pandemic. So thank you very much, and you're welcome to Brookings. So here, Your Excellency, you touched upon some of the priorities of the reset agenda that you mentioned. We wondered if you could elaborate a little bit more on the economic transformation and recovery plan of your country.
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks for your very kind words. And I'm pleased you said those kind words about my minister. She's a good minister.
Great.
Proud of her. But just to respond to your question, when we were faced with the horrors of COVID, we literally emptied our bank account, our government investment account, like we'd never done before, to buy therapeutics, medicines, to deal with the pandemic, to deal with an ailing economy, unemployment, and people having to stay at home, and provide food support to families, and support businesses, just to be sustained. And we never knew how long this would take. So we emptied our pockets. But what was most glaring to us, we emptied our pockets to supplement the donation of medications that came, to buy our own. And we paid cash. The medicines didn't come on time. That was really sore. And so it got us thinking, we'd never want to find ourselves in this space again. So what do? We trudged along and we decided we're going to reset our priorities. And that's how the reset agenda came about. And so number one priority in the reset agenda was to do all we can to prevent the shocks we experienced as we did with the COVID-19 pandemic, and never allow people to die as they did. So save Botswana's population from COVID-19 and other pandemics. So we marshaled all resources, including even investment in the potential for Botswana for the first time to produce human vaccines. And we were doubling up and, springboarding from our wonderful experience from, long-lasting partnerships we had with the United States government on their support, stellar support. And we want to thank the United States government and the people for the support they gave to our fight against HIV and AIDS. Because we're literally, as my former president said, on the brink of extinction as a people. And so with what we learned from that, we stepped up and we started developing our capacity to develop vaccines. And luckily we found a partner out of California, Dr. Patrick Sonshun, and we are on course to develop vaccines. In fact, the first registered in Botswana for the first time has been produced, vaccine. And we're also going to be developing other vaccines that have been neglected, tropical disease vaccines that have been neglected. So the ecosystem is there, including the pharmaceutical side, including all the value chain aspects of it. The second priority was to realign the whole government machinery to this priority set of agenda in the agenda, reset agenda. And so it is a transformation in the thinking and the prioritization of what we need to focus on. The third is to focus on digitalization. The digital economy provides a low-hanging fruit for Botswana to not just springboard, but to frog leap literally into the 22nd century, so to speak. And so we're investing heavily in on that, to the extent that we're going to be connecting, by the end of next financial year, every one of our registered, recognized villages in Botswana. So the schools are connected, the health facilities are connected. The kotla, this is a word you should learn about Botswana, the kotla. It's a public assembly point, steeped deeply in our culture of democratic traditions of engagement. These are all connected. And then we're connecting business and homes right now. And 5G is also come on board and growing in its use in Botswana. The fourth priority is that of value chains development. And these are intended, particularly in a rural economy and agricultural space, to provide opportunity for massive job creation. When you combine digitalization and value chains development, we're very good in the production of beef and small stock meats, whether lamb or chevron. If you taste it, you'd never eat anything else. We also good at growing unique crops. And so we want to grow our agricultural space so that we produce enough food for ourselves and even export. It's extremely important. But better than anything else, we also want to be producing good quality food. We're very strict with our beef and meat production. We do not allow for the use of any hormones or growth stimulants. And we're pretty strict in our crop production too. So we produce, nutritious, good food. The fifth priority is that of mindset change. We recognize that the whole population needs to shift dramatically in the way it perceives issues and problems. But, all put together, we want to be the place to go to find solutions to global problems.
Mr. President, thank you very, very much. I think there are many, many lessons from the 5 priorities. The particular one that I wanted to single out is your approach, your whole of government approach in the way you marshal these priorities. I wanted to also touch on the role that leadership and accountability and democratic ethos play in your conceptualization experience of the process of national development in Botswana.
Shall I go?
Please.
Well, the compulsion to be accountable is second nature to us. It's deep in our traditions, and that's where the quota comes in, where you even have, sayings in our language, which loosely translated mean that a leader is a leader by virtue of respect of the people, or at the will of the consent of the people. And others, such as, every opinion is to be respected and given space. So we have grown up in a system where a democratic system was part of our culture. And we voted. The majority view held. The minority was always protected and respected. And that's formed the community. And so when the political parties formed and we elected to have a multi-party system, it was an easy transition. And that's why we've so easily held elections every 5 years. And yes, we've had the ruling party in power since independence, but it's had its ups and downs. It had to reform itself, and the opposition keeps trying, and they sometimes get nearly good, but they quite haven't made it. But it's a free, transparent, open, democratic system, and we feel the need to do that. We have a parliamentary system where ministers and the government goes to account. And I, as head of state, deliver what's called the State of Nation address every year at the beginning of the parliamentary year. And the government machinery, as in the representatives, are there to respond to whatever criticisms. And I engage with the press frequently, and the press operates completely independently and openly.
I think on the issue of democratic governance, not just African countries, I think some might even say that the United States has a lot to learn from Botswana at this time. Talking of the United States, let me now turn to the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit and to find out from you, what 2 outcomes are you hoping for from this summit?
Well, I'll mention 2, but one has already succeeded in manifesting itself, in that we're delighted as African leaders that the U.S. has began to look at us differently. We took a sharp note of how we were perceived before. The outcomes that one desires out of this is to build long-lasting, strong partnerships. Because we come to the U.S. because you're a successful country. You've got successful institutions. You've got a very successful private sector. You're innovative. You're creative. You provide leading solutions to a lot of global problems. And so we'll pick as we have begun to and engage others. And with these partnerships, we want to catapult our economy and our development in ways that we think are best for us.
The audience has been very, very patient. Let's take one or two questions and then return to for His Excellency. I see Xavier over there from OSF. Yes, microphone, please. Just your name and make sure what you say has a question mark at the end.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. President. I work for the Open Society Foundation. My name is Xavier Mwambwa. I also happen to be your neighbor. I'm Zambian. So I'm very interested in Botswana's story. I think Botswana is an exemplary case in Africa and a rarity, unfortunately, as well. Not many countries have gone through that. So taking you back to this week, what would you be telling your peers, our other African president, around two things? First of all, your own role in terms of providing leadership beyond Botswana to the rest of the continent. Because right now, I think there's a creeping leadership vacuum across the continent, whether it's political, economic, peace and security. And I think you could sort of provide a good example for that with other emerging leaders on the continent. Secondly, we've seen across the last few years in terms of how Africa engages with the rest of the world, whether it's the US or China or India. I think one of the key consensus among the ordinary citizens in Africa is that we tend to be very reactive. Everybody else has a plan for Africa except ourselves. So what can you say about how you envision your own leadership and using Botswana's success story to sort of provide a peer-to-peer kind of leadership to our other African presidents?
Excellent question.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, my colleague presidents are my colleagues. I don't have a paternalistic relationship with them. I don't pretend to tell them anything. We work alongside each other quite well. But as in life, you often look over what your neighbor's doing and you ask, and if the ask is made, we've been very generous in sharing what we do and how we do it. And I'm glad to note that particularly in the Southern Africa region, we have a very good rapport with all our neighbors, and we engage quite frequently. We're actually quite on friendly terms, right? We have our challenges differ, and part of it is because of our different histories and backgrounds, and the way the world has also responded to each of us in different ways. I mean, if you look at the Zimbabwe story, where sanctions have been imposed, and if you look at the history of Zimbabwe and you knew it objectively, you would think, as I do, that those sanctions should not be there, right? There's a better way of engaging a very productive, highly literate, educated, and useful Zimbabwe to make Zimbabwe prosper and the rest of Africa too, including neighbors such as Botswana. So when one country does well, we all do well, right? Secondly, is that yes, the world has not been extremely kind to Africa. It's almost as if the carving out and colonization of Africa assumed a new form without the labels of colonization, but some measure of conquest, right? And we're trying to move away from that and engage so that they work with us and not work on us and through us, right? It's very important to make that distinction. But with the varying levels of vulnerability, some countries are not able to withstand the pressures as much as others. And some are serious. I mean, if military force threatens you, you do what's best to save your people. But increasingly, particularly with the Agenda 2063, particularly with the AFCTA, which is an aspect of Agenda 2063, I see Africa pulling it together. And gosh, if you and I live to see our dreams come through, we're going to be a damn powerful place. I look forward to that, and we have what it takes to do it.
Thank you. I believe we have one more hand here, and then we go to the lady over there. So, Leon, thanks.
Close to your mouth. Your Excellency, thank you very much. My name is Liang Wang. I'm the new country representative for the World Bank for Botswana. You called us not to miss the boat to go to Botswana. In my case, I'm jumping on the boat in 3 weeks with my family. So I look forward to my time in Botswana in the coming few years. Your Excellency, you nicely laid out the transformational agenda of Botswana. You end your speech with the note on partnership. So my question is about your vision of this partnership. How do you see the multilateral organizations like mine, but also others, to rally behind your priorities, your programs, so we can support the transformational agenda of Botswana and to continue the success story of your country? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Shall I take it?
Please.
Well, good question, and I'm glad you're in Botswana, and you're not going to miss the boat. You know, multilateral partners are extremely important to us, but the way in which we relate to these multilateral partners needs to be much more symbiotic. You understand our position, where we come from, and we understand yourselves. Take rates of interest of borrowing money. Take the units of currency that we borrow money in. We need much fairer transition to move from where we are to where we need to be. I think multilateral partners have a lot to learn in terms of A, being patient, and 2, recognizing that even where they're from, it never took such a short time to transition as they expect of us. And lastly, please focus on what really drives growth. And for too long, multilateral partners have focused on our commodities and the commoditization of Africa. That's blatantly wrong and unfair. Because what happens is everything that is externalized in terms of the controls. And when we miss the boat to pay you, you are mean. You're mean. And you set our people against us. That can't be for peace. That can't be for sustainable development goals. That can't be for what you even stand for. And so you need to really revamp your thinking on that. Good luck.
Thank you very much. The young lady there, and then Richard. We go to the audience, those online. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this on? Yes, it is. Hi, I am Angela Pashayan, Dr. Angela Pashayan, teaching at American University. It is an honor to be here. I specialize in informal settlements, and I want to say that your mindset is so refreshing. It is so refreshing, and I am so grateful to be in your presence and to hear you speak about Botswana. I think about population, and I think about the population of people all across Africa, and I think about many countries that have more than 50% of their population living in extreme poverty, which means they're not being able to capitalize on those human resources to contribute to the economy. Mm-hmm. And so my question is how do you do it? How is Botswana able to keep extreme poverty rates so low? How are you able to keep people working and housed? Because you are truly an example to other countries across the continent.
Thank you very much. Perhaps we take one more just next door. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for a wonderful exposition. I'm Richard Newfarmer with the International Growth Center. You mentioned as one of the strategic sectors that you would like to develop is trade and services. It seems to me that this is a sector that throughout Africa has kind of been ignored. And there's a lot of talk about manufacturing and the need to develop manufacturing, and while that's important, trade and services actually is really important. I wondered what kinds of measures Botswana was going to be contemplating to promote further trade and services, and secondly, how that might fit into the Continental Free Trade area and what negotiations are going on in that area.
Thank you. Mr. President.
Thank you. Let me begin with the academics, professor in American University, Sorry, I didn't quite get your name. Angela Pashian. Your very difficult question. I don't think I'll do justice to it in the short time that we have, but that's another reason why we should invite you over to Botswana, right? You really need to come. There's context to it. We were largely ignored by the colonists, right? Botswana's colonization was a sheer accident, real accident. And I bet you the Brits can't stop kicking themselves for not really doing what they thought would have been a decent job. Because Cecil John Rhodes, who then colonized Rhodesia, which we in Zimbabwe, a brutal capitalist, he wanted a railroad from Cape to Cairo and needed land to transverse us through. And that's how Botswana was threatened by Cecil John Rhodes. And he set about setting about reserves and establishments of white settlers and farms and kicking the natives out. And so the local leaders, the chiefs, objected to this and mounted a campaign because they asked the Brits to protect them and they refused. So they mounted a campaign, went to Britain with some missionaries and campaigned and got sympathy of the British public, and that's how we were declared a protectorate. It was very, very reluctant. So we were sparsely populated, it's largely desert, and so nobody really, it was harsh conditions. And that's why we were among the 17 poorest countries in the world in 1966. We were just what you're saying, really poor. I mean, I remember, poor. So, you know, everybody who's a Motswana in this room has had their education on the back of diamond mining, pure and simple. And those have not been found by our colonizers, nor the British South Africa Company, which, by the way, was founded by Cecil Rhodes, who founded De Beers, which ended up being our partner. And right now we're at a stage where we're having our renegotiating our agreement. And it's exciting, I tell you. Yeah, it's a pity I can't divulge the details, but it's really exciting. Yeah, and so there's a lot to understand from that. And obviously we adopted policies that allowed for the distribution of these resources, invested a lot in infrastructure and provided access to everybody who was able to, you know, schooling, health, roads, you name it. And that's why we were able to lift a lot of people out of poverty. But we're having challenges with job creation, and which brings me to the next question of services, you know. Business process, organizations are one of the ways in which we'd want to go. We want to have people invest in our peace and stability dividend, because that's how services really thrive. But we can't provide services profitable enough just for ourselves as a nation state. We'd want to be seen as a solution to provide services to our neighborhood. And that's where the peace and stability, including financial stability, because, you know, your money is safe if you put it in Botswana. And I mean really safe. It is illegal for the government to come after your money. So we can't get your money. We only ask you to give us part of your profits, which is a tax, a very low rate of tax. I mean, embarrassingly low, right? So we want to be seen as a place to locate or headquarter your investments in the region and then work out from there. So financial services are a major service that we could provide. We're not a tax haven though, right? Two, we want to also play a bigger role in logistics supply management. Because of our strategic geographic location and our relatively good infrastructure, and we just opened a magnificent bridge to cross over the Chobe Zambezi into Zambia. With Zambia, we co-own it with Zambia, the Kazungula Bridge, and that has provided such easy access to the rest of Central Africa and Eastern Africa from the industrial hub of South Africa. So there are a multiplicity of services. We're also developing the ecosystem for developing health tourism. And therefore, those in the region and those who are from places that do not have such good health facilities could see Botswana as a place to go to. But you know what? More exciting is that, in the fractured health systems of the developed world, we could be providing a solution. If, for instance, you're in the UK and you have to wait for 10 months for an NHS hernia operation, and it costs X number of pounds, if you add up the cost of the ticket, stay in Botswana, medical treatment, it'd come to cheaper than what you'd pay in the UK and not wait. And guess what? After that, we not only soothe your soul and heart, we put you in an ambient environment of the best wildlife species in the world. How can you not get well? Huh? So it's not just health tourism. We also want to provide education solutions, because if there's a place to stay and study, you'd want your young teenagers to be in a safe place, good quality education. So we're trying to grow the ecosystem of that. And obviously we're building on our security infrastructure, we're building on attracting the best teachers, etc. It's a journey. So welcome to Botswana.
Thank you very much. On that note, let me just do justice to our friends online. There's a question from Eric. His question very briefly is, what are your hopes in the next 10 years for the African Continental Free Trade Area and SADC?
I'm an eternal optimist. I believe so deeply in SADC, our beautiful region, and our neighbors. I believe in Africa because I'm an African, but I also believe in Africa because you're all Africans. You're all Africans. You know that, don't you? That's where home is, real home. Not the ET home, this is real home. But, over and above that, here's a unique opportunity, unique almost to our time in history, where 54 countries have come together and said, we want to work together. We've got things to share among ourselves, but also to share with the world. But we also want to grow the intra-Africa trade, which is really low. And that is the fastest way to uplift our people. It's a model better than whatever we've seen. So I'm hopeful that this is going to work, and we will get partners who will support us in realizing this and not disrupt us, whatever the geopolitics of the world.
Right. Mr. President, thank you very, very much. And on behalf of the Brookings Institution, I would really like to thank you very much, and please a round of applause for